I still remember the exact moment those words left his mouth. "You're too old to decide, Mom." They hit harder than any slap could. My name is Evelyn Hartley, and at 71, I thought I had heard it all. But nothing prepares a mother for the day her own child starts treating her like she's fading, like her choices don't matter anymore. It was a warm Sunday morning in June. The kind of day when the sunlight dances across the kitchen counter and everything smells like fresh coffee and buttered toast. I had just set 2 plates on the table when my son, Landon, walked in. He looked tired, his tie loosened, that permanent furrow between his brows deep as ever. Landon's a corporate lawyer, sharp, confident, and always in control. But with me, he often forgot I was more than the woman who raised him. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said, not even waiting for me to sit. "About the house." The house. Our home. The same one where his father and I had built everything. The wooden porch that creaked under his little feet when he ran out to chase fireflies. The kitchen wall still had faint pencil marks of his height over the years. "What about it?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. He sighed. "It's getting too much for you to handle alone. The garden, the maintenance, the bills. You should move into a senior community, Mom. They'll take good care of you." The way he said they, like I was some fragile antique ready to be packed away, made my heart ache. "I can still take care of myself, Landon," I replied gently. "You don't need to worry." But he just shook his head, like he had already decided for me. "Mom, you don't have to prove anything. You've done enough. It's time to let us handle things." Us. That included his wife, Samantha, a polite woman who always smiled a little too tight around me. She meant well, I suppose, but she treated me like a piece of family decor, something to dust and move when convenient. That morning, I sat down, staring at the steam rising from my untouched coffee. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him that I had raised him through nights of fever, through every heartbreak, through his father's passing. But all I could do was whisper, "You think I can't decide what's right for me anymore?" He didn't answer, just checked his watch, kissed my forehead, and said, "It's for your own good, Mom." When the door shut, I sat there in silence, my chest burning. Too old to decide. Those words kept echoing until they didn't just hurt. They lit a fire inside me. That evening, I went out to the garden. The roses I planted 20 years ago were still blooming, stubborn as I was. My late husband, Arthur, used to tease me for talking to them. "You spoil those roses more than you spoil me," he'd laugh. But that garden was my world. I wasn't ready to leave it for a sterile room and bingo nights. As I pruned the bushes, I thought about how easily people give up their choices once others start telling them they're too old. No one ever tells a man he's too old to dream, do they? But a woman past 70, suddenly she's treated like glass. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Landon's words. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my own reflection, tired eyes, yes, but still full of life. I had more stories left, more mornings to wake up to, more laughter to share. And suddenly, I knew I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I called my best friend, Joanne Miller, who lives a few blocks away. We've been friends since our nursing days back in the late 70s. If there's one person who knows how to stir the pot, it's Joanne. When she answered, I said, "Jo, you ever been told you're too old to decide anything?" She laughed. "Honey, my daughter tells me I shouldn't even be driving." I told her, "When I start mistaking the gas pedal for the brake, then we'll talk." I smiled for the first time in 2 days. "Landon wants me to move into a senior community." Joanne snorted. "Oh, he does he? Let me guess. He's found a nice, modern facility with good medical staff and social activities." Exactly those words. She sighed. "Evie, you've given that boy everything. Maybe it's time you give yourself something." That sentence settled deep in my heart. Give myself something. I realized I hadn't done that in years. After we hung up, I made myself tea and sat by the window, watching the mail truck crawl down the street. My mind was racing, not with anger anymore, but with possibility. What if I proved him wrong? What if I reminded my son and myself that I was still capable of making bold, even shocking decisions? The next week, I pretended to go along with his plan. I even visited the senior community he picked. It was beautiful. Yes, fresh paint, smiling nurses, neatly trimmed lawns. But it felt lifeless. No laughter. Just people waiting. Waiting for what I didn't know. As I walked through the hallways, I saw a woman staring blankly out the window. She had white hair neatly pinned up and hands folded in her lap. I caught her eye and smiled. She smiled back weakly, but there was no spark. No light. I knew right then. I'd never belong there. That night, I pulled out an old photo album. There I was, standing on a beach in California, wind in my hair, wearing a sundress Arthur said made me look like sunshine. I hadn't been back there in over 30 years. And just like that, a crazy thought bloomed in my mind. What if I did something completely unexpected? Something no one saw coming. Not Landon, not Samantha, not even Joanne? I looked around the house filled with memories and whispered to myself, if they think I'm too old to decide, maybe it's time I make a decision that shakes their world. The next morning, I began writing a list. A list of things I'd always wanted to do, but never had the courage for. Travel alone. Reopen my old art studio. Maybe even move somewhere new, not because I was told to, but because I wanted to. Days passed. I acted normal. Landon thought I was coming around to his idea. I'll handle the paperwork, Mom, he said, smiling proudly, like he'd done me a favor. I just smiled back. You do that, dear. But behind that smile, I had already started my plan. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I was going to earn it back in a way he'd never forget. And on the morning of July 14th, before the sun had fully risen, I did something that would change everything. I packed one suitcase, left a letter on the kitchen table, and locked the front door behind me. As I looked back at the house one last time, the golden light spilling through the windows, I whispered, let's see if I'm too old now. When Landon came home that evening, the house was empty, except for that letter. And in it, I wrote something that would turn his world upside down. Sometimes the only way to remind people you're still alive is to start living again. If you've ever felt overlooked because of your age, tell me in the comments, what would you do to prove them wrong? When I left that morning, the sun had barely begun to warm the earth. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a secret between you and the world. My suitcase rolled over the gravel as I made my way to the small taxi, waiting by the curb. The driver, a kind young man named Kyle, helped me load it into the trunk. Where to, ma'am? He asked. I hesitated, looking at the horizon before answering softly. To the train station. I didn't have a clear plan, only the weight of years pressing on me and a stubborn fire that refused to die. For 71 years, I had lived within limits others drew for me. First my parents, then my husband, and now my son. But that morning, as the taxi pulled away, I promised myself that this time, I would decide what comes next. The train station was busy, filled with chatter and the distant hum of engines. I bought a ticket to Santa Barbara, California, the place where Arthur and I spent our honeymoon nearly 50 years ago. My hands trembled as I held the ticket. I wasn't running away from my life. I was running back to the part of me I had lost. On the ride, I stared out the window as the countryside slipped by. My heart was heavy, but underneath the ache was something else. Excitement. Freedom. I was terrified, but it was the kind of fear that makes you feel alive. Halfway through the trip, my phone buzzed. 23 missed calls. Landon. Then Samantha. And finally, one from Joanne. I sighed, turned it face down, and closed my eyes. I couldn't face them yet. Not until I understood what I was really doing. When I arrived, Santa Barbara was just as beautiful as I remembered. The salty air, the hum of seagulls, the faint scent of sunscreen and ocean breeze. I booked a small ocean view room at a bed and breakfast run by a woman named Martha. She looked to be around my age, with silver curls and a laugh that filled the room. You traveling alone, dear? She asked as I handed her my ID. I smiled. Yes. I suppose I am. She winked. Good for you. Most people forget how to do that. That evening, I walked along the beach barefoot, the waves licking at my ankles. I felt a strange peace, as if the sea was washing away years of guilt and doubt. I sat down on the sand and whispered to Arthur, "I hope you be proud of me." The ocean didn't answer, but a soft wind brushed my cheek like a gentle kiss. The next morning, I finally turned my phone on. The first voice message was from Landon. His tone was sharp, panicked. "Mom, where the hell are you? I came home and you were gone. You left a letter. What is this? Are you okay? Please, just call me." I played the second one. "Mom, this isn't funny. You can't just disappear like this. I'm filing a missing person report if you don't respond by tonight." I exhaled slowly. He wasn't worried because he missed me. He was worried because he wasn't in control anymore. When I checked my email, I found something that froze my blood. A message from Samantha, sent just a day before I left. It wasn't meant for me. I could tell by the subject line. "About your mom's house." My heart thudded as I opened it. It was an exchange between Samantha and a realtor. "Once Evelyn moves to Willowbrook Community," she had written, "we can list the property immediately. The buyers are ready to close within a month. Please keep me updated on timing." My hands shook. They were planning to sell my house. My home. Not after I agreed, but the moment they got me out. That's why Landon was pushing so hard. It wasn't just concern. It was convenience. I sat there for a long time, staring at the ocean through blurry eyes. My son, my only child, had turned my independence into an obstacle to be managed. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was whisper, "Arthur, what did we do wrong?" Later that day, I called Joanne. "Evie, good Lord, where are you? Landon's been calling me every hour."
I'm fine, Jo.
"I'm in Santa Barbara." "Santa Barbara? Alone?"
Yes.
"And I'm not coming back. Not yet." She was quiet for a moment. "Evie, are you sure this isn't just you reacting in the heat of the moment?" "I found out they were going to sell the house, Joe." "What?"
Yes.
"It's all there in an email. They didn't even plan to ask me. Just move me out and cash in." Joanne gasped. "Oh, that boy's lost his mind." I chuckled bitterly. "Seems like it runs in the family. I used to think I raised a good man." "You did," she said softly. "He's just lost his way. Money and pride can do that." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to the balcony, the moon hanging low over the water. My chest ached with anger and betrayal, but somewhere inside me was a strange clarity. If they saw me as incapable, maybe it was time to show them exactly what a 71-year-old woman could do. Over the next few days, I began to rediscover parts of myself I thought had died. I took a watercolor class at the community art center. My hands were rusty, but my heart remembered. The instructor, a young woman named Lucy, said, "You have such emotion in your strokes, like you've been holding it in for years." I smiled. "You have no idea." Every evening, I'd sit on the beach with my sketchbook, watching the sun dip below the waves. And every time, I felt myself coming back to life. Then one afternoon, as I was sipping tea on the porch, my phone rang again. This time, it was Landon's voice, calmer but colder. "Mom, I know you're in California. Joanne told me."
Of course she did.
He continued, "Look, I get that you needed space, but this is getting ridiculous. You can't just disappear like this. We have responsibilities and the house situation." I cut him off. "I know about the email, Landon." There was a pause. Silence thick enough to choke on. "What email?" "Don't play dumb." "The one Samantha sent to the realtor." He sighed heavily. "Mom, that's not what you think." "Oh, really? Then what is it?" "Because it looked a lot like you two were planning to sell my home the second I was out of it." "It's not like that. We thought it'd be easier for you if." "Easier for me?" My voice shook with fury. "You mean easier for you? I've been taking care of that house for 30 years, and suddenly you think I can't decide what happens to it? That I can't even live in it?" He stayed quiet, and in that silence I realized something. He wasn't sorry. He was just embarrassed that I'd found out. "Mom," he finally said, "I'm coming to get you. We need to talk in person." "No, I said firmly. Not this time. I'll come to you when I'm ready. Mom, please don't make this harder. I laughed bitterly. Landon, I'm 71, not senile. You've made it plenty hard already. Then I hung up. That night, I cried. Not because I was scared or lonely, but because I finally saw the truth. My son didn't see me anymore. Not as a person. Not as his mother. Just as something to manage, like an aging property. A few days later, I received a letter from the bank. It was addressed to Arthur and me, though Arthur had been gone for over a decade. Inside was a notice, an early inquiry for property transfer approval. My name was listed, but so was Landon's. I felt my breath catch. He wasn't just thinking about selling. He was already doing it. The betrayal cut deep. The boy I had once rocked to sleep, the boy who held my hand at his father's funeral, now forging my future behind my back. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. So I made a decision. I would go back, quietly. I wouldn't tell him. I'd fly home, walk into my own house unannounced, and see what they were doing. 2 mornings later, I stood in front of my home again. The familiar scent of roses filled the air, but the sight made my stomach twist. There was a large for sale sign on the lawn. I felt my knees go weak. My name was still on that deed, and yet here it stood, like a gravestone for the life I'd built. I walked up the porch steps, trembling. The door was locked, but I still had my key. When I stepped inside, everything looked different. My furniture was pushed aside, family photos boxed up. My living room had been turned into a staging area for potential buyers. As I stood there, stunned, I heard voices from the kitchen. Landon and Samantha. She's not coming back, Samantha said. You said it yourself. She's probably staying in California. We can handle this quietly. I just don't feel right about it, Landon murmured. You said you'd take care of things. We need that sale for the new house. It's not like she needs it anymore. My blood ran cold. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but clear. So that's what this was all about, wasn't it? They froze. Landon turned, his face pale. Mom? Yes, I said, walking closer. It's me. The woman you decided was too old to decide. The room fell silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Samantha's mouth opened, but no words came out. Landon looked like a boy caught stealing cookies, only this time it wasn't cookies. It was my life. And as I stared at them, my hands trembling, I realized I hadn't even discovered the worst of it yet. Because on the kitchen counter, next to the open binder of sale documents, was a file labeled Power of Attorney. My name was on it, but the signature beneath it wasn't mine. I stood there frozen, staring at that piece of paper like it was a live wire ready to burn through my hands. Power of Attorney. My name typed neatly at the top, but the signature scrawled at the bottom. Oh, I knew my own handwriting. That wasn't mine. It was shakier, slanted differently, like someone had tried to mimic it but couldn't quite get it right. My heart started pounding, a dull roar in my ears as I looked up at Landon and Samantha. What is this? My voice came out sharp, trembling with disbelief. Landon's eyes darted toward the paper, then back at me. Mom, it's not what you think. I took a step forward, my hand clutching the document. Not what I think. Because what I think is that my own son forged my signature. Samantha's face drained of color. Evelyn, please calm down. It was just paperwork. Paperwork. I snapped. You forged legal papers with my name on them and call that paperwork? My voice cracked, anger and heartbreak colliding. Tell me the truth right now, both of you. Landon swallowed hard, avoiding my eyes. I didn't forge it. The attorney drew it up. I just signed for you. You just signed for me? My voice rose. You took away my right to make my own decisions. Mom, listen, he pleaded, stepping closer. You weren't thinking clearly. You left without telling anyone where you were going. You could have been hurt. You could have. Stop, I shouted. Don't you dare twist this into concern. You weren't worried about my safety. You were worried about control, about losing the house, about losing your hold on me. The air went still. Samantha's eyes glistened, but She didn't say a word. I looked around the kitchen, my kitchen, and suddenly, every familiar thing felt foreign. The table where I'd taught Landon his spelling words, the fridge where I'd pinned his drawings, the walls I'd painted myself. Everything looked like a stranger's house now. I clutched the back of a chair to steady myself. "I can't believe I raised you to become this," I whispered. He flinched. "Mom, please don't say that. I'm saying it because it's true." He took a step forward, desperate. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought it'd be better this way. You're alone, you're getting older, and I didn't want you to be taken advantage of." "Taken advantage of?" I said bitterly. "By who, Landon? The world or by you?" His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't have an answer. I turned away, my hands trembling as I clutched the edge of the counter. "I lost your father, Landon. I lost my health, my friends, my youth. But I never thought I'd lose your respect." Tears welled in my eyes. I tried to blink them away, but one slipped down my cheek, warm and heavy. Samantha stepped forward softly. "Evelyn, we were only trying to help. You've been so alone since Arthur passed. We thought. You thought wrong." My voice was low, but sharp enough to cut through glass. "You thought I'd quietly fade away, too old to fight back. Well, guess what? I'm still here." I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door, my steps uneven but determined. "Mom, wait." Landon called. I turned to face him, tears glistening in my eyes.
No, Landon.
You wait. You wait and think about what you've done. About the trust you broke. Because someday you'll be standing where I am, old, forgotten, treated like a burden, and then you'll finally understand. And with that, I left. Outside, the cool air hit me like a slap. I walked down the street, unsure where to go. My chest ached, my heart thundering with grief and fury. I felt betrayed, but beneath that, something else was growing. A strange, quiet power. I found myself at the park nearby, the same one where I used to take Landon when he was a boy. The benches were the same, though the trees had grown thicker, their roots curling deep into the earth. I sat down and let the tears come. I cried until my hands stopped shaking, until the pain in my chest turned into something steadier, something colder. When I finally looked up, the world seemed clearer. The betrayal had cut me deeply, but it had also done something else. It had woken me up completely. I wasn't just going to sit and let this happen. That night, I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. I didn't want to go back to Martha's place in Santa Barbara, not yet. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I laid out every document I had. Old property records, bank papers, Arthur's will. My hands moved automatically, like they knew what to do before my mind caught up. And that's when I noticed something odd in the old paperwork. Arthur had left a clause in the will that I'd forgotten about. A clause that stated the property could never be sold without both of our signatures, mine and Landon's, only if I was declared legally unfit. I froze. They couldn't sell the house without proving I was mentally incompetent. That's why the forged power of attorney existed. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd tried to erase my ability to fight back. The next morning, I went to the county office and requested copies of all property-related documents. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, frowned as she pulled up the records. "Looks like there was a recent submission for transfer authority," she said, squinting at the screen. "Dated 2 weeks ago." "Was there a medical certification attached?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, from a Dr. James Keller. It says you were deemed unfit to handle financial matters due to cognitive decline."
I ser det her.
Cognitive decline? My voice broke. That's a lie. I've never even met that doctor. The clerk hesitated, lowering her voice. "You can file a fraud report, ma'am. This is serious." Serious didn't begin to describe it. When I walked out of that building, my legs were shaking. I sat on a bench outside, trying to catch my breath. My own son had gone as far as to fake a medical declaration about my mental state. My heart felt like it was splitting in two. I pulled out my phone and dialed Joanne. When she answered, I could barely speak. "Joe," he forged my signature. And a doctor's note. Said I wasn't fit. There was a stunned silence. Then she whispered, "Oh, Evelyn, I can't believe it, Joe. My own son. My own flesh and blood." "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You're not powerless, you hear me? You need to go to the police. Take those papers, get a lawyer. This is fraud, Evie." "I know," I whispered. "But if I go public, it'll ruin his career. He could lose everything. After what he did, maybe he should." I hung up and stared at the horizon. The sun was setting, and for a long time, I just sat there, listening to the world go quiet. My mind was torn. One side wanted justice. The other still saw the little boy who used to hide behind my apron when he was scared. That night, I wrote in my journal, the same one I'd kept since Arthur's passing. "How do you punish the person you love most?" I didn't have an answer. Over the next few days, I watched from a distance. I saw the for sale sign come down, then go back up. I saw strange cars pulling into my driveway, buyers, curious and unknowing. Each one felt like a stab in my chest. On the fifth day, I saw Landon standing in the yard, talking on his phone. I was parked across the street, hidden behind a tree. His voice was sharp, impatient. "Yes, we'll close next week. My mother won't be an issue." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When he went back inside, I finally broke. I sobbed into my hands, shaking. "My mother won't be an issue." The words cut deeper than the forged papers. He wasn't just lying about me. He was erasing me. Something inside me snapped. I wiped my tears, started the car, and drove straight to the police station. I didn't care anymore about protecting him. I didn't care about his career, his image, or the family dinners that would never happen again. At the front desk, a young officer looked up. "Ma'am, can I help you?" I placed the folder on the counter, my voice steady but hollow.
Yes.
"I need to report a forgery, and I need to speak to someone about elder fraud." He took the folder, flipping through the pages, his expression growing serious. "This looks bad," he murmured. "Do you have proof the signature isn't yours?" "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes. "I have 71 years of knowing exactly who I am." He nodded. "We'll get a statement from you, Mrs. Hartley." That night, as I walked out of the station, my heart was both broken and strangely lighter. I'd done it. I'd taken back control. But as I got into my car, my phone buzzed, a new message from an unknown number. It was a picture. A photo of my living room, my things, my art. But everything was smashed, shattered glass, ripped cushions, chaos everywhere. And the text below it said, "You shouldn't have done this, Mom." I stared at the envelope in my trembling hands, the one that held the final truth. I had found it in Michael's study drawer, hidden beneath old bills and property documents. It wasn't just a letter. It was a mirror showing me everything my son had become. For years, I had blamed myself for losing him, for letting the distance grow between us. But as I read the first few lines, I realized something terrible. My son had already decided my place in his life, long before I'd lost my independence. The letter was from his lawyer. It wasn't about family or care, it was about control. "Once she's transferred the house deed, we can place her in the facility by June," it said. My breath hitched. I could almost hear the lawyer's calm tone, his pen scratching on paper, planning my quiet disappearance from the home I had built with my late husband. I sat there for a long time, the rain tapping on the window, the letter lying open on my lap. My heart hurt, not because of what Michael had done, but because of what he had become. The same boy who used to cry when I left him for work, who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms, had now written me off like a legal transaction. When the door creaked open and Michael entered, I didn't hide the letter. He froze for a second, then tried to play it off. "Mom, I can explain." I looked straight at him. "Then start explaining before I lose the last bit of love I have for you." He rubbed his forehead, pacing. "It's not what you think. I just wanted to make sure you're safe. You've been forgetful lately, and it's hard to manage everything. The house is too big, the bills." "Stop." My voice came out sharper than I expected. "You wanted my house, Michael. Don't sugarcoat betrayal with concern." He exhaled, frustrated. "Mom, You don't understand how hard life is now. The economy, the kids' school, the mortgage. You're sitting on an asset that could change everything for us. You've lived your life. Why can't you help your family move forward? I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I am your family, I said softly. And I've helped you every single day of my life. But you weren't asking for help. You were planning a replacement. He didn't deny it. He just looked away. For the next few days, we barely spoke. I stayed in my room mostly, writing in my journal and remembering my late husband, Harold. I wondered what he would have said. He always believed in second chances. But could I forgive something like this? Could a mother forgive being erased while she was still alive? On the third day, I decided I wouldn't be silent anymore. I called my friend, Eleanor, the retired attorney who had helped me with Harold's will years ago. When she arrived, I told her everything about the letter, the lies, the manipulation. She listened without interrupting, her expression turning harder with every detail. "Ruth," she said finally, "this isn't just cruel. It's illegal. If he's trying to force you into signing anything, that's elder coercion. You have rights, and you can fight this." Her words lit something inside me, a flame I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to be the helpless old woman everyone pitied. Not anymore. That evening, I invited Michael and his wife, Laura, to dinner. I cooked his favorite roast chicken just like I used to when he came home from college. The house smelled warm and familiar, but underneath it all was a tension so thick you could slice it. As we ate, I asked calmly, "Michael, do you remember what your father said before he passed?" He blinked. "Mom, why are we talking about Dad right now?" "Because I do. He told you, never take more than you've earned. I wonder, have you forgotten that too?" Laura tried to intervene. "Ruth, please, we're all just trying to do what's best for everyone." I turned to her. "Everyone but me, you mean?" I stood up, took the folded document from my cardigan pocket, and placed it on the table. "I found your letter. You've both made your intentions very clear. So let me make mine just as clear." I unfolded a new paper, one Eleanor helped me prepare. "This is my updated will. The house, my savings, everything, it's going to charity. Specifically, to a home for women who've been abandoned by their families." Michael's face went pale. "Mom, you can't do that." "Oh, I can. And I already did." His voice rose. "You're doing this to punish me." I shook my head.
No.
"I'm doing this to remind you that love can't be bought, and family isn't a contract." He slammed his hand on the table, the plates rattling. "You're ruining everything. Do you know how hard I've worked for this family?" "Yes," I said quietly. "But you stopped working with this family. You started working against it." For a long, silent moment, he looked at me, his eyes full of anger, hurt, and something else, shame. Then he stood up, grabbed his coat, and left without another word. Laura followed, crying softly. After they left, I sat there in the dim dining room, staring at the empty chairs. The house felt both quiet and alive at once. I thought of Harold, and I swear I could almost hear his voice whisper, "You did the right thing, Ruth." The next morning, I received a text from Michael. "We need to talk. Please don't do this. You're making a mistake." But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was making one. I felt clear.
Free.
Still, a part of me ached, because no matter how justified I was, he was still my son. And a mother's heart never stops loving, even when it's broken. A week passed. Then another. No word from Michael. But one night, as I prepared for bed, I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. Through the window, I saw his car parked outside. He sat there for a long time, engine idling, lights on. I thought he might come in, but he didn't. He just drove off into the darkness. Something in me knew, the next time we saw each other, everything would change forever. I looked at Harold's photo on the mantel and whispered, "I'm ready, dear. Whatever comes next, I'm ready." That night, I placed the sealed will and Eleanor's documents into a box labeled "For the Truth." And as I turned off the light, I couldn't help but feel that the storm was about to return, one last time. The morning after, I saw Michael's car vanish down the driveway, the world felt strangely quiet. The rain that had lingered for days had finally stopped, leaving the air crisp and clean. I stepped out onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking softly beneath my slippers, and watched the mist roll over the hills beyond the orchard. It looked just like it did the day Harold and I first moved here, full of promise, full of beginnings. Only now it felt like I was standing at the end of something instead. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for Michael's call or Laura's apology. I simply let the silence speak. It told me everything I needed to know, that some lessons in life come only when you stop running after those who won't turn back. I spent the next few weeks quietly rebuilding my routines. I cleaned the garden, baked for the neighbors, and helped at the local women's shelter every Thursday. The same shelter that would one day receive this home after I was gone. There, I met women who had lost far more than I had. Women who had been forgotten by their children, their husbands, their families. And yet, when they laughed, it was as if the world had never hurt them. One of them, a gentle soul named Clara, told me, "Forgiveness doesn't mean you let them back in. It just means you stop carrying them on your back." That sentence stayed with me. Because I had been carrying Michael, his choices, his anger, his greed, like a stone tied around my heart. And now, slowly, I was learning to set it down. One afternoon, while I was pruning the roses in Harold's garden, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. I froze, shears in hand. The door opened and out stepped Michael. But this time he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in spirit. The arrogance that had filled every word he'd spoken before was gone. He walked up the path slowly, his hands in his pockets. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. I didn't reply right away. I just looked at him, trying to recognize the boy I'd raised beneath the man he'd become. He glanced around the yard. "The place looks the same. You still take better care of these roses than yourself." I smiled faintly. "The roses don't argue back." He let out a dry laugh, then looked down. "I deserve that." We stood in silence for a while before he said, "I read your will." "I know," I said. "Eleanor told me she sent you a copy." He nodded, staring at the gravel under his shoes. I was angry. At first, I wanted to contest it. I even called the lawyer again. But then, I found Dad's old journal in the attic. "The one you kept all these years." I stopped pruning. "You found Harold's journal?" He nodded. "There's a line he wrote about you." He said, "Ruth loves deeply, so deeply that sometimes people mistake her strength for stubbornness." It hit me, Mom, because I've done exactly that. I've called you controlling, old-fashioned, even selfish when you were just strong. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I stayed quiet. "I don't know when I turned into someone who saw you as an obstacle," he continued. "Maybe it was fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of failing my family. But I hurt you in the process. And I'm sorry, Mom. I really am." For a long time, I said nothing. The wind rustled the roses, carrying the scent of earth and memory. I could have scolded him, reminded him of all the pain he caused, but I didn't. I saw the boy who used to pick wildflowers for me on Sundays. I saw my son again. I reached out and took his hand. "Michael, when you were little, you once told me you'd buy me a castle one day, so I'd never have to work again. Do you remember that?" He smiled faintly.
Yeah.
"I think I drew it with crayon." "You didn't need to give me a castle," I said softly. "You just needed to stay my son." He swallowed hard, tears forming in his eyes. "Can I still be?" I squeezed his hand gently. "You never stopped being, Michael. You just lost your way." We stood there like that, mother and son, two broken souls trying to mend what pride had shattered. Over the next few weeks, he started visiting more often. Sometimes he'd bring his kids, who ran through the garden just like he used to. Laura came once too, quiet and tearful. She hugged me and said, "We were wrong, Ruth. You didn't deserve what we did." I simply told her, "Learn from it. Be kinder to the woman you'll one day become." As time passed, I didn't change my will. The charity would still receive this house after I was gone, but I told Michael he'd always have a home here while I lived. And that was enough. The money, the property, the papers, they didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the sound of laughter in this old house again. Months later, on a quiet evening, Michael and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in gold and lavender, the same colors Harold used to say reminded him of peace. Michael broke the silence. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you did. Donating everything. You turned your pain into something good. I don't think I could have done that." I smiled. That's what age teaches you. When you've lost enough, you stop counting what's gone and start valuing what's left. He nodded. "I hope one day I can be half as strong as you." "You will be," I said softly. "But strength isn't about how much you hold on to, Michael. It's about knowing when to let go." The porch light flickered on as the sun dipped below the horizon. For a long moment, we sat there in silence, not the heavy silence of anger, but the peaceful quiet of understanding. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, the one Harold started, and I continued after he passed. I wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just gives you a future that's no longer ruled by it." I closed the book, placed it beside Harold's photo, and whispered, "We did it, dear." He found his way back. As I turned off the lamp, I thought about everything I'd been through. The betrayal, the confrontation, the loneliness. And yet, through it all, I had found something precious. Peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from understanding that love, when real, can survive even disappointment. They say mothers live for their children. But I've learned something else. Sometimes, a mother must live for herself first, so her children can remember how to love without taking. And that's exactly what I intended to do with whatever days I had left. The next morning, I woke up early, made my tea, and sat by the window. The light was soft, golden, spilling through the lace curtains just like it had for decades. I felt Harold's presence in that light, gentle, proud, and eternal. I smiled, whispering to the dawn. He called me too old to decide. But in the end, I made the only decision that truly mattered. I chose myself, and I chose love. And as the sun rose higher, painting the sky in fire and forgiveness, I knew this was the ending I was meant to write all along.